Okay. What's up, guys? Um, my birthday is in 10 days. So I'm gonna be watching the Crank That music video.
VIP to get more than just savings with Geico. Every customer gets 24/7 fast-friendly claim support.
Soldier Boy in it
This is
all.
like
Watch you crack that, watch me
my
roll. Watch me
57th
crack that
favorite
Soldier
song.
Boy, Superman. And watching you. And watching you. And watching you.
Who is Soldier Boy? And what in the heck is that dance?
Yeah, what's that dance?
Soldier Boy?
Soldier Boy, tough.
Soulja
Hey, I
Boy
got this new
tough.
dance for y'all called the Soldier Boy. Just gotta punch, then crank back 3 times from left to right. Soldier Boy, I'm in it. Why me crank it? Why me roll? Why me crank that Soldier Boy? That Superman? That now why me crank that Soldier? 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 Now what? Soldier Boy, I'm in it. Why me crank it? Why me roll? Why me crank that Soldier Boy? That Superman? That now why me crank that Soldier? 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 Now what? Soldier Boy, up in it. Why me lean that? Why me rock? Superman? That yeah, why me crank that Robocop? Super friend, now why me jocking on them, hate them, man. When I do that, Soldier Boy, I lean to the left, then crank that thing now. I'm jocking on you, I'm jocking on you. And if we get the fight, then I'm you catch me at your local party, yes, I crank it every day. Haters get mad, cause I got me some bathing Nate. Soldier Boy, I'm in it. Why me crank it, why me roll? Why me crank that Soldier Boy, that Superman? That now why me crank that Soldier? 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 Now what? Soldier Boy, I'm in it. Why me crank it, why me roll? Why me crank that Soldier Boy, that Superman? That now why me crank that Soldier? 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 Now what? I'm bouncing on my toes. Why me super soak that? I'ma pass to A-Rab and he gon' crank it up for sure. Haters wanna beat me, Soldier Boy, I'm the man. They be looking at my neck, saying it's the rubber band, man. Why me do it? Damn, let get to it. No, you can't do it like me, though. So don't do it like me, folk. I seen you try to do it like me. Man, that damn was ugly. Soldier Boy, I'm in it. Why me crank it? Why me roll? Why me crank that Soldier Boy? That Superman? That now why me crank that Soldier? 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 Now what? Soldier Boy, I'm in it. Why me crank it? Why me roll? Why me crank that Soldier Boy? That Superman? That now why me crank that Soldier? 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 Now what? I'm too fresh, I'm in it. Why me crank it? Why me crank that Roosevelt and super soak that? Super soak that. Super soak that. Super soak that. Super soak that. I'm too fresh, now why me shuffle? Why me crank that Soldier Boy? Now Superman. 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 Soldier Boy, I'm in it. Why me crank it? Why me roll? Why me crank that Soldier Boy? That Superman? That now why me crank that Soldier? 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 Now what? Soldier Boy, I'm in it. Why me crank it? Why me roll? Why me crank that Soldier Boy? That Superman? That now why me crank that Soldier? 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 Now what?
Guys, 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 that, that song was really good. Um, my birthday, my birthday is in 10 days. I'm gonna post, I'm gonna post another video on my birthday. It's gonna be really cool. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys.